The millionaire's lost son appears years later, and the shock causes a change in the family. The squeal of tires on wet asphalt echoed down Fifth Avenue as Maxwell Bennett abruptly braked his Mercedes-Benz in front of the imposing Bennett Enterprises building. His hands were shaking, not from the cold typical of Manhattan in October, but from the message he had just received. "Your son is alive, Mr. Bennett, and he wants to talk to you." 25 years. That was how long Maxwell had been carrying the burden of guilt for the death, now apparently mistaken, of his firstborn. The boating accident that had supposedly taken Christopher's life at the age of 5 had destroyed not only his family, but also his ability to feel anything other than emptiness and remorse. "Sir, are you sure you don't want me to call security?" asked Richard, the head of reception, observing the man in his 30s sitting in the waiting area of the luxurious lobby. The stranger was wearing simple clothes, faded jeans and a plaid shirt, completely out of keeping with the corporate environment. "No," Maxwell replied dryly, his eyes fixed on the familiar figure who, even after so long, bore the unmistakable features of Caroline, his late wife. The same determined chin, the same gray-green eyes that had so often gazed at him with childlike love. With hesitant steps, Maxwell approached. The young man stood up, his posture revealing a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Christopher." Maxwell's voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Actually, it's Ryan now," the man replied, his voice controlled but shaky. "Ryan Mason. It's the name my adoptive parents gave me." The world around him seemed to disappear. Maxwell staggered slightly, leaning on a nearby pillar. Fragments of memories flooded his mind. Little Christopher running across the deck of the yacht, the high-pitched scream, the splash in the water, the fruitless search that had lasted for weeks. How? It was all he could articulate. "It's a long story," Ryan replied, running a hand through his dark hair. "Another Caroline trait. I was found by a fishing boat miles off the coast. I was unconscious, with amnesia. I ended up in the foster care system in Portland, Oregon." Maxwell observed Ryan's calloused hands, so different from his own, scarred by years of physical labor. His son, his Christopher, had grown up in a completely different world from what had been planned for him. "Why now?" Maxwell asked, his voice regaining some firmness. Ryan pulled an old, crumpled photo out of his pocket. In it, a younger Maxwell held a small boy on his shoulders, both smiling at the camera. "I found this among my foster mother's things after she passed away last month." That's when the memories started coming back. The silence that followed was deafening. Staff hurried past, casting curious glances at the unusual scene unfolding in the lobby. Charlotte, Maxwell's executive assistant, watched everything from her desk, her expression oscillating between concern and fascination. "I'm not here for the money," Ryan added quickly, as if reading his father's thoughts. "I have an established life in Oregon, my own machine shop. I just needed to know the truth, understand who I am." Maxwell felt something break inside him. Perhaps the last wall he had built around his heart after all the losses. "You're my son," he said simply, his voice breaking, "and I've spent every day of the last 25 years wishing I'd swapped places with you on that boat." Ryan blinked rapidly, containing his emotions. "There's more," he said after a moment. "I also have a daughter, your granddaughter, Lily. She's 4. The mention of his granddaughter made Maxwell lean more heavily on his back. A granddaughter? A part of Christopher? No, Ryan. That continued his lineage, completely oblivious to the fortune and business empire that would one day be rightfully his. "Mr. Bennett?" Charlotte approached cautiously. "Shall I cancel your meetings for the day?" Maxwell didn't even look in her direction. "Cancel the whole week," he replied, his eyes still fixed on Ryan. "My son has come home." As father and son made their way to the private elevators that led to the roof of the building, where Maxwell's office was located, the weight of 25 years of guilt, grief, and regret slowly began to dissipate. In its place, something new was growing. Hope, mixed with the paralyzing fear that it was all just a dream from which he would wake up at any moment. "You look so much like your mother," Maxwell murmured as they entered the elevator. Ryan just nodded. his own mind filled with questions and fragmented memories that were beginning to make sense. The elevator rose silently, carrying not just two people, but decades of untold stories, buried secrets, and the promise of a new beginning that neither of them had imagined possible that morning. The rooftop office offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, but neither Maxwell nor Ryan paid any attention to the skyscrapers that stretched to the horizon. Sitting on opposite sides of a solid mahogany table, father and son studied each other, each trying to process the surreal reality of that moment. "Did you get married again?" Ryan asked, breaking the dense silence that had settled in since they left the elevator. Their eyes scanned the photographs carefully arranged on the walls, all of business, awards, and corporate events, none of them personal. Maxwell shook his head negatively. "After losing you and your mother," he paused, swallowing, "Caroline never got over your disappearance. The marriage fell apart the following year. She was gone 2 years later. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but we all knew she died of grief." Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of that information. His own memories of Caroline were hazy, fragments of a musical laugh, the smell of floral perfume, gentle hands smoothing her unruly hair. "My adoptive mother, Helen, she always said I had sad eyes even when I smiled," Ryan shared, his voice soft. "I guess some part of us always knows the truth, even when the mind forgets." Maxwell stood up abruptly, heading to an elegant bar in the corner of the office. "Can I get you anything?" he asked, his hands busy with crystal bottles, looking for something to do other than face the emotions that threatened to boil over. "Water's fine," Ryan replied. "I stopped drinking when Lily was born." The mention of his granddaughter made Maxwell pause. "What's she like?" A genuine smile lit up Ryan's face for the first time since he had arrived. He took his cell phone out of his pocket, found a photo, and passed it to Maxwell. On the screen, a dark-haired, bright-eyed girl was smiling, hugging a big golden dog. "That's Lily with our Labrador, Duke," Ryan explained. She's everything to me. Smart, stubborn at times. She loves animals and has already decided she's going to be a vet when she grows up." Maxwell looked at the photo for a long moment, his fingers trembling slightly over the screen. "She has Caroline's smile," he murmured. "Her mother, Amanda, died in childbirth," Ryan revealed softly. "Since then, it's just been the two of us. Well, 3 counting, Duke." Silence filled the room again, but this time it was laden with mutual understanding. Both men knew intimately the pain of loss, the void left by the absence of loved ones. "That day on the boat," Maxwell began, his voice hoarse, "I was on the phone, closing an important deal. I should have been paying attention to you. But," he shook his head, lost in memories. "The scream, when I turned around, you had already fallen. The search went on for weeks. I've never forgiven myself." Ryan stood up, approaching the window. Below, the city continued its frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding so many floors above. "The doctors said I hit my head when I fell. That's why I couldn't remember anything. The Masons, Helen and Robert, they gave me a good life in Portland. They weren't rich, but they never lacked love." Maxwell watched his son, noticing for the first time the contrast between them. While he himself wore a tailored Italian suit, Ryan wore simple, practical clothes. His hands, unlike Maxwell's, marked only by fancy pens and computer keyboards, showed calluses and small scars from manual labor. "You said you have a workshop?" Ryan nodded. "I started as a mechanic when I was 16. I worked hard, saved up, took some technical courses. Now I have my own business, Mason's Auto Repair. It's nothing compared to," he gestured to the luxurious office, "all this, but it's mine." "You've built something on your own," Maxwell said, a touch of pride in his voice. "That's worth more than any inheritance." Ryan's phone vibrated in his hand. He looked at the screen and smiled slightly. "It's Lily. She always calls me at lunchtime. Do you want to?" Maxwell hesitated. "Would you mind if I?" Ryan pressed the video call button. Lily's excited face filled the screen. "Dad, the teacher let us bring Duke to school tomorrow. Pet show day." "Hey, princess," Ryan smiled. "That's so cool. Look." He paused for a moment, looking at Maxwell, who was watching the scene with a mixture of anxiety and hope. "There's someone here I want you to meet." Ryan turned the phone around, allowing Lily to see Maxwell. "Lily, this is your grandfather?" The girl's eyes widened. "I have a grandfather?" Maxwell approached the screen, his heart pounding. "Hello, Lily," he managed to say, his voice breaking. "It's such a pleasure to meet you. Do you have a big house?" Lily asked innocently. "And a dog?" "Duke needs dog friends." A surprised laugh escaped Maxwell, the first Ryan could remember hearing. "I have a beach house in Hampton," he replied. "No dogs yet, but maybe we can change that." Lily's smile lit up the screen. "Dad, can we visit Grandpa? Please?" Ryan looked at Maxwell, years of unanswered questions and complex feelings passing between them in a single glance. "I think we can arrange that, Princess," he finally replied. "I think we can arrange that." 2 weeks later, the Bennett's beach house in Hampton came to life for the first time in years. Maxwell had spent the last few days personally overseeing every detail of the preparation for Ryan and Lily's arrival. The guest room had been transformed into a magical space for his granddaughter, with a castle-shaped bed and shelves full of carefully selected children's books. Mr. Bennett, Margaret, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 3 decades, observed her boss nervously arranging the toys for the 3rd time. "I've never seen him so agitated since before the accident." Maxwell stopped, his hand still holding a teddy bear. "They'll be here in an hour, Margaret. What if she doesn't like it? What if it's too much?" Ryan grew up in such a different environment. "Children don't care about luxury," Margaret replied softly. "They care about love. And that, sir, you've had plenty of in your heart for so long." The sound of tires on the gravel driveway interrupted the conversation. Maxwell ran to the window, his heart racing as he saw the rental car pull up. Ryan got out first, opening the back door to a bouncing Lily, while a large golden Labrador jumped excitedly beside him. "Grandpa!" Lily's joyful cry echoed through the air as she ran towards the front door, Duke at her heels. Maxwell barely had time to open the door before he felt little arms wrapping around his legs in a tight hug. "Hi, Princess," he replied, his voice trembling slightly as he bent down to hug her properly. The smell of baby shampoo and the feel of soft hair against her face brought tears to her eyes. "Wow, this house is like a castle," Lily exclaimed, her eyes scanning the luxurious surroundings with childlike admiration. "Can Duke come in too?" "Of course he can," Maxwell replied promptly, to the surprise of Margaret, who had never seen animals inside the house in all her years of service. "Actually, I have a surprise for him too." Ryan approached more slowly, carrying 2 modest suitcases. His eyes studied the house, absorbing the details that screamed wealth and privilege. A world that could have been his, but now seemed to belong to a parallel reality. "Come on, let me show you your rooms," Maxwell offered, picking up one of Ryan's suitcases. "Margaret has prepared a special snack for you." As they climbed the stairs, Lily chattered non-stop about the plane trip, her first, and how the clouds looked like cotton candy. Duke faithfully followed her every step, his nails making a soft tinkle against the hardwood floor. "This is your room, Lily," Maxwell announced, opening the door to the transformed bedroom. The little girl's cry of joy at the sight of the castle-shaped bed was all the reward he needed. "Dad, look, it's just like the one in the princess movie we watched," Lily exclaimed, running to explore every corner of the room. Ryan stood in the doorway, watching the scene with mixed emotions. "You didn't have to do all that," he said softly to Maxwell. "Yes, I did," Maxwell replied in the same tone. "I have 25 years of birthday presents and Christmases to make up for both of you." Before Ryan could reply, Lily let out another cry of excitement. "Duke, look, you've got a cot too, and new toys." Indeed, in the corner of the room there was a luxurious dog bed and a basket overflowing with new canine toys. Duke was already enthusiastically investigating his new collection. "Mr. Bennett," Margaret called from the doorway, "snacks are served on the terrace. I thought the children might like to see the ocean while they eat." At the terrace table, overlooking the private beach, Lily devoured sandwiches cut into star and dolphin shapes, while bombarding her grandfather with questions about everything. from the boats passing in the distance to the shells in the sand. "Can we go to the beach later, Grandpa? Please?" Lily begged, her eyes identical to Caroline's, shining with hope. Maxwell looked hesitantly at Ryan, who nodded slightly. "Of course you can. But first—" He stood up, disappearing into the house for a moment before returning with an old photo album. "I thought you might like to see some pictures of your grandmother," he said softly, taking a seat next to Lily. "And of your father when he was your age." Ryan approached, his heart racing as he saw the first photo. Caroline holding a baby, her radiant smile frozen in time. "She was beautiful," he murmured. "The most beautiful," Maxwell agreed, turning the page to show more photos. Christopher on his first bike, Caroline and Christopher making a snowman. Happy moments from a life that seemed to belong to another era. "Dad, you were little just like me." Lily laughed, pointing to a photo of Christopher playing on the same beach that now stretched out in front of them. The sound of the waves provided a soothing soundtrack as the pages of the album were turned. Each photo a fragment of memory that helped fill in the gaps of a story long since interrupted. There, on that sunny terrace, 3 generations of Bennetts were beginning to weave a new narrative, stitching together present and past with the golden threads of hope and forgiveness. After 3 days in Hampton, the routine had settled naturally. Every morning, Lily woke up early to walk with Duke on the beach, always accompanied by Maxwell, who discovered a new joy in searching for shells with his granddaughter as the sun rose over the horizon. On that particular morning, however, something was different. Ryan watched from the balcony as his father and daughter played in the sand, a nagging feeling growing in his chest. The ease with which Lily had connected with Maxwell was beautiful to watch, but also painful. Every complicit smile between them was a sharp reminder of the lost years of her own childhood. "Coffee, sir?" Margaret approached silently, offering a steaming cup. "Thank you," Ryan accepted, his eyes still fixed on the seaside scene. "You know, Margaret, you worked here when I was little, didn't you?" The housekeeper nodded, her hands intertwined in front of her impeccable apron. "Yes, sir. Since before you were born." "What was he like? As a father, I mean?" The question came out before Ryan could stop it. Margaret remained silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Your father was always a complex man. He worked hard, it's true, but his eyes shone every time you entered a room. After the accident," she paused, "well, he was never the same again." Ryan took a sip of coffee, letting the hot liquid warm his suddenly tight throat. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have looked earlier, if I should have made more of an effort to remember." "Guilt serves no purpose, Mr. Ryan," Margaret replied softly. "What's important is now." On the beach, Lily had persuaded Maxwell to help her build an elaborate sandcastle. Duke ran circles around them, occasionally knocking over a tower with his Johnny tail. "Dad," Lily shouted, waving, "come and help. Grandpa says we can make a moat out of real water." Ryan smiled, but before he could reply, his phone vibrated. The name on the screen made his smile disappear. Robert Mason, his adoptive father. "Hi, Dad," he answered, stepping away from the balcony. "Ryan." Robert's familiar voice sounded tired. "Son, we need to talk. It's about the workshop." Ryan's heart raced. Before his trip, he had left the workshop in the care of his manager, Mike, who had worked with him for years. Did something happen? "Mike had a motorcycle accident last night. He's in hospital. Nothing serious, but he'll be out for a few weeks." "The workshop, well, you know what it's like at this time of year. There are 3 important cars due for delivery this week." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he had unknowingly inherited from Caroline. "I need to get back. I know you're having an important moment there, son. Helen would have been so happy to hear that you'd found your biological family. But business is business," Ryan added, a sad smile on his lips. "I understand, Dad. I'll sort it out." When he hung up, Ryan noticed that he was no longer alone. Maxwell was standing in the doorway, still with sand in his expensive shoes. "Problems?" asked his biological father. Ryan quickly explained the situation. "I have to go back to Portland tomorrow," he concluded. "That workshop is everything I've built. I can't let it fall apart." Maxwell was silent for a moment, his face a mask of conflicting thoughts. "What if," he began hesitantly. What if I could help? No, Ryan answered quickly, perhaps too quickly. I appreciate that, but I need to do this alone. Ryan, Maxwell stepped forward. I know that money is a delicate subject between us, but I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a chance not to interrupt this moment with Lily. She's so happy here. As if summoned by her grandfather's words, Lily rushed into the room, Duke at her heels. Dad, Grandpa says we can have a picnic on the yacht today. We can, can't we? Ryan's heart froze. Yacht. The word triggered something in his memory. A flash of panic, cold water, darkness. His breathing quickened. Maxwell immediately noticed the change in his son. Lily, darling, why don't you and Duke go with Margaret to prepare the picnic basket? After Lily had left, jumping around happily, Maxwell approached Ryan. You remembered something? Ryan nodded, his voice hoarse. Water. Very cold. I can't breathe. He leaned on the nearest wall, fighting the wave of memories that threatened to engulf him. We can picnic on the beach, Maxwell offered quickly. We don't have to. No, Ryan interrupted him, taking a deep breath. I can't let my fear control her life too. Just stay close. Please. Maxwell swallowed, moved by the trust implicit in that request. Always, he promised. This time, I'll always be close. Outside, they could hear Lily humming as she helped Margaret prepare the sandwiches. Life took its course, weaving new patterns with the threads of the past, turning scars into bridges to a future that neither of them had imagined possible just a few weeks before. The yacht, Caroline, rocked gently at anchor in the Bennett's private marina. It was smaller than the previous one, Ryan observed, trying to control his breathing as they approached the pier. Lily bounced in front of him, holding Duke's collar tightly in one hand and Maxwell's in the other. Grandpa, why is the boat called Caroline? Asked Lily, her eyes shining with curiosity. Maxwell exchanged a quick glance with Ryan before answering. It was your grandmother's name, dear. Your great-grandmother was Italian, and she said that naming boats after loved ones brings protection at sea. Ryan felt his legs tremble as he climbed aboard. Fragments of memory danced through his mind. Childhood laughter, the smell of the sea, chocolate ice cream melting in the summer sun. But there were also other, darker fragments that he struggled to keep at bay. Dad, are you all right? Lily asked, noticing his pallor. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, princess, Ryan forced a smile. Just a little queasy. It'll pass. Maxwell led everyone to the living area, where Margaret had already organized a veritable feast on an elegant table. Duke quickly found a comfortable spot in the shade, keeping a watchful eye on Lily. You know, Maxwell began, pouring lemonade into crystal glasses. I've been wondering about your problem in the workshop, Ryan. Ryan tensed his shoulders immediately. I told you I don't need to. Let me finish. Maxwell held up a hand. I'm not offering money. I'm offering a practical solution. I have a network of contacts in Portland. I can find a qualified mechanic to replace Mike on a temporary basis. Someone I can trust. Lily, who was nibbling on a sandwich, intervened. So we can stay longer, Dad. Please. Ryan watched his daughter, so at ease in this environment that until a few days ago had been completely foreign to them. She had blossomed in recent days, her natural joy amplified by her grandfather's presence and the endless possibilities that Hampton offered. I'll think about it, she finally replied. A comfortable silence settled in, broken only by the sound of the waves against the boat's hull and the heavy breathing of Duke, who had fallen asleep. Suddenly, a stronger gust of wind knocked Lily's hat off, and it flew towards the edge of the yacht. My hat! She shouted. Running to catch it, the world seemed to slow down. Ryan saw his daughter moving towards the edge and, in a flash, superimposed the image of himself, years ago, making the same fatal move. Without thinking, he launched himself forward, grabbing Lily around the waist and pulling her back so hard that they both fell to the deck. Ryan! Maxwell ran up to them, while Duke barked, agitated. Are you guys okay? Lily looked more surprised than scared. Dad, you're shaking. Ryan hugged his daughter tightly, his whole body shaking with uncontrollable tremors. The memories, once fragmented, now flowed like a torrent. The important phone call that had distracted Maxwell, the run after a wind-up toy, the moment of imbalance, the icy impact of the water. "I remember," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I remember everything." Maxwell knelt beside them, his own voice choked. "That day, I should have been more attentive. I should have dropped the phone, the business, everything. It wasn't your fault," Ryan said firmly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "It was an accident. Just an accident." Lily looked from one to the other, her big eyes full of concern. "Dad? Grandpa? Why are you crying?" Maxwell took his granddaughter in his arms, including her in the hug with Ryan. "Sometimes, darling, people cry because they finally found something that's been lost for a long time. Like when Duke hid my favorite teddy bear under the bed," she asked innocently, drawing wet laughter from both men. "Something like that," Ryan replied, ruffling his daughter's hair. Turning to Maxwell, he added, "About that offer to help with the workshop. I think we can talk about that." The afternoon sun bathed the yacht in golden hues, reflecting off the calm waters of the bay. The same waters that had separated father and son decades ago now witnessed their reconnection, as if the ocean itself wanted to make up for the tragedy of the past. Margaret, who was watching the scene discreetly, wiped away a furtive tear. In all her years of service, she had never seen her boss so truly happy. The name Caroline shone on the yacht's hull, and she could have sworn she felt the protective presence of her former employer hovering over them all, blessing that moment of healing and forgiveness. The news spread like wildfire through Manhattan's social circles. Maxwell Bennett's lost son had returned. The Wall Street Journal published a short note in its social column, and soon the phones at Bennett Enterprises were ringing off the hook with requests for interviews and congratulations. "I can't believe it leaked," Ryan commented, looking at the pile of newspapers on the breakfast table at Hampton's house. Lily was playing on the beach with Duke, under Margaret's watchful eye. Maxwell sighed, carefully folding the newspaper. "It was inevitable. The Bennetts are, well, we're a well-known family. People have always been fascinated by the story of my missing son. We are." Ryan repeated the word, noticing the inclusive use of the pronoun. "I'm still getting used to that idea." "Ryan," Maxwell began, choosing his words carefully, "I know we promised not to talk about money or inheritance, but as my son, you're entitled to—" "Stop," Ryan interrupted him firmly. "I don't want any of that. I'm proud of what I've built in Portland. My workshop may not be a business empire, but it's honest and it's mine. And that's exactly why I want to make you an offer," Maxwell continued. "Not as a charity, but as an investment. A partnership." Ryan raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "What kind of partnership?" "Bennett Enterprises has an automotive division that has been stagnant for years. I was thinking of expanding it to the West Coast, starting with Portland, a network of high-end garages, with your technical knowledge and my management experience." "Mason and Bennett Auto Services," Ryan muttered, testing the name. "Bennett and Mason," Maxwell corrected with a smile. "Alphabetically it makes more sense." Before Ryan could reply, Lily came running in, Duke at her heels, both covered in sand. "Dad, Dad, guess what? The teacher called Margaret. My school in Portland is going to do an exchange with a school here in Hampton. Can I join? Please." Ryan and Maxwell exchanged surprised looks. "Exchange?" Ryan asked. "It's a new program," Margaret explained, entering the room. Brighton Academy in Hampton is establishing partnerships with schools all over the country. It's 2 exchange weeks per semester. "Please, Dad," Lily begged, her eyes shining with anticipation. "So I can see Grandpa more often, and Duke can play on the beach." Ryan felt something change inside him. He watched his daughter, so happy and at ease in this new world they had discovered. He looked at Maxwell, who was trying to disguise the hope in his eyes. He thought about his workshop in Portland, the potential for growth, the possibilities that were opening up. "What if," he began slowly, "we didn't have to choose between Portland and Hampton?" Maxwell leaned forward, interested. "What do you have in mind?" "The partnership you suggested. We could start with 2 bases. The workshop in Portland would be the technical center, specializing in restoration and customization. Here in Hampton, we could establish the main showroom, taking advantage of your network of contacts. That would mean frequent trips, Maxwell observed. It would mean 2 houses. Lily exclaimed excitedly. 1 for each coast. Duke will love it. Ryan couldn't help but smile at his daughter's enthusiasm. We need a strong team in Portland. Someone to manage when I'm here. Leave it to me, Maxwell replied, reaching for his phone. I have the perfect contact. Former Ford executive, looking for a new challenge on the West Coast. Grandpa, Lily interrupted, tugging on Maxwell's sleeve. If we're going to have 2 houses, you need to teach me how to play golf. All my new friends here play golf. Maxwell laughed, taking his granddaughter on his lap, oblivious to the sand on his Italian suit. Golf? Darling, when I was your age, I was terrible at golf. Your grandmother Caroline used to say that I had more talent for building sandcastles. Is that so? Lily asked, fascinated. Tell me more about Grandma. Ryan watched father and daughter interacting, a sense of peace settling in his chest. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, but here they were, planning a future together, building bridges between 2 worlds that seemed irreconcilable. Margaret, he called to the housekeeper, do you think we still have those photo albums of my mother's in the attic? Margaret's eyes sparkled. Of course, Mr. Ryan. In fact, there's a whole box of memories that your mother kept. Letters, drawings of you from school. She never gave up hope. While Margaret went upstairs to fetch the relics of the past, Ryan picked up his phone and started making a list. Hire manager for Portland. Look for house in Hampton. Lily's school transfer. Workshop expansion. Son, Maxwell interrupted him gently. One thing at a time. We have all the time in the world right now. Ryan nodded, putting the phone away. Outside, the Hampton sun shone over the ocean. The same ocean that had once separated them and would now, ironically, serve as a bridge between their 2 lives, their 2 worlds, their 2 homes. Duke barked happily, running circles around them, as if approving of the new plans. The future was unfolding in front of them, no longer as a straight line, but as a mosaic of possibilities, each piece fitting perfectly into its place. 3 months had passed since that first meeting in the Bennett Enterprises lobby. Fall was giving way to winter, and the first snow of the year was beginning to fall on Manhattan. On the 50th floor of the corporate building, Ryan was adjusting his tie for the 10th time in front of the executive bathroom mirror. Relax, Maxwell said, entering the bathroom. It's just a board meeting. Just a board meeting? Ryan laughed nervously. I'm about to present our expansion proposal to a group of corporate sharks who probably see me as the prodigal son who's going to squander the family fortune. They'll see what I see, Maxwell replied, straightening his son's tie with the experience of decades of corporate meetings. A competent businessman who has built something from scratch and has a clear vision for the future. The Bennett and Mason Auto Services project had evolved far beyond the initial idea. In recent weeks, father and son had worked tirelessly on the details. Market studies, financial projections, expansion plans. The Portland garage would only be the beginning. Mr. Bennett, Charlotte knocked on the bathroom door. The board is meeting. Well, there's a little surprise waiting in the meeting room. Ryan and Maxwell exchanged puzzled glances before heading for the conference room. As they opened the door, they were greeted by a familiar cry, surprise. Lily was there, wearing a small women's suit that perfectly matched her father's and grandfather's, holding a colorful sign that read, "Good luck, Dad and Grandpa." Next to him, Robert Mason, Ryan's adoptive father, was smiling warmly. "Robert?" Ryan asked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't miss my son's big day," Robert replied, hugging Ryan. "Besides, Maxwell invited me. He said we needed both of the future CEO's parents here today." The board members began to enter the room, casting curious glances at the unusual family scene. Lily ran to hug her father, whispering in his ear, "You're going to rock, Dad. The teacher said I made the prettiest poster in the class." "Thanks, Princess," Ryan replied, kissing the top of her head. "Now go with Grandpa Robert for that hot chocolate Margaret promised, okay?" As Lily skipped off with Robert, the last of the executives took their seats. Ryan took a deep breath, organizing his notes on the edge of the mahogany table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maxwell began, his voice commanding immediate attention. Today, I'm not just here as chairman of the board, but as a father. 3 months ago, I received the greatest gift a man could ask for. My son came home, but Ryan didn't come back empty-handed. He brought with him a business vision that will revolutionize our automotive division. Ryan stepped forward, projecting the first slide of his presentation. The Bennett and Mason Auto Services logo flashed on the screen, 2 intertwined wrenches forming a stylized B&M. The automotive industry is changing, Ryan began, his voice gaining confidence. Consumers don't just want cars, they want experiences. Our proposal is to create a network of automotive centers that combine technical excellence with the prestige of the Bennett brand. As the presentation progressed, Ryan noticed something surprising. The executives were genuinely interested. Their questions were insightful but constructive. There was none of the skepticism he had feared. "What strikes me," commented a senior director, "is how you've managed to bring together the best of both worlds. The hands-on experience of traditional workshops with the refinement and scale of large corporations. Just like you two," another executive added, looking between father and son, "different backgrounds, different experiences, but sharing the same entrepreneurial DNA." 2 hours later, when the last board member left the room after unanimously approving the project, Ryan collapsed into a chair, exhausted but relieved. "You were right," he said to Maxwell. "They saw beyond the prodigal son." "They saw what I always knew was there," Maxwell replied, squeezing his son's shoulder. "The Bennett blood. It's not about money or status, Ryan. It's about building something that lasts, something that makes a difference." The door opened again and Lily ran in, followed by Robert. "Did you make it?" she asked anxiously. "We did it, Princess," Ryan smiled, picking her up. "We're now officially a family business." "A family," Robert corrected gently. "The business is just a bonus." Maxwell held out his hand to Robert. "Thank you," he said simply, "for looking after him when I couldn't." "Thank you for bringing him back to us," Robert replied, shaking the offered hand. Lily looked between her 3 grandfathers, one biological, one adoptive, and Margaret, who had just walked in with a tray of coffee, and who was practically her grandmother too. "I think I have the biggest family in the world now," she declared proudly. The adults laughed, but there was truth in the child's innocent words. There, at the top of the Bennett building, with the snow falling softly outside the panoramic windows, a new definition of family was being written. One that transcended blood, names, and fortunes. The snow covered Hampton in a blanket of white on that Christmas Eve, the first the Bennett family would celebrate in 25 years. The beach house, normally silent during the winter, was bursting with life and warmth. In the great hall, a majestic Christmas tree reached almost to the ceiling, decorated not only with the Bennett's traditional crystal ornaments, but also with handmade ornaments made by Lily at school and some old ones, kept by Margaret all those years ago, including a small papier-mâché star that Christopher had made when he was 5. "I can't believe you kept this," Ryan muttered, holding the star carefully. Margaret, who was adjusting the last of the decorations on the dining table, smiled fondly. "Your mother never let us throw anything away," replied the housekeeper. "She used to say that one day you'd come back to see your artwork." Outside, through the large windows, you could see Maxwell and Robert building a snowman with Lily, while Duke ran happily through the snow, leaving a trail of footprints. The scene was a living testimony to how traditional definitions of family could be rewritten. "Dad!" Lily shouted from the garden. "Come and see. Grandpa Max and Grandpa Rob made you snow." Ryan laughed when he saw the snowman wearing an old Mason's auto repair cap. It was surreal how their 2 lives, that of the millionaire's lost son and that of the Portland mechanic, had merged so naturally over the last few months. Bennett and Mason Auto Services was already a reality. The first unit in Portland had been completely refurbished, keeping the essence of the original workshop, but adding the refinement of the Bennett brand. In Hampton, the showroom was almost ready for the opening, scheduled for the spring. "Thinking about the empire we're building?" Maxwell asked, coming and shaking the snow off his coat. "Actually," Ryan replied, "I was thinking about how life turns around. A year ago, I was just Ryan Mason, the owner of a small garage in Portland. Now you're still Ryan Mason," Robert added, taking Lily by the shoulders. just with an extra surname in a bigger family. Lily jumped off her adoptive grandfather's shoulders, running to hug Margaret, who came in with a tray of hot chocolate. And I have 3 grandparents. That makes me 3 times luckier. 4, Maxwell corrected softly, looking at Margaret. Margaret is as much a part of this family as any of us. The housekeeper blushed, her eyes watering. In all her years of service, it was the first time she had been so openly recognized as part of the family. Time for presents, Lily announced, rushing over to the tree where piles of packages were waiting. First, Maxwell interrupted gently. There's something we need to do. He walked over to an old cabinet and pulled out a thick envelope. Ryan, this is for you. Ryan took the envelope with curiosity. Inside were legal documents and, to his surprise, a handwritten letter. The elegant handwriting was unmistakable. It was from his mother, Caroline. She wrote this a week before. Maxwell paused, his voice breaking. She never gave up hope that you would come back. With trembling hands, Ryan began to read. My dear Christopher, if you are reading this, it means that my heart has been right all these years. You have survived. You have come home. There is so much I want to tell you. So much love I want to express. But most of all, I want you to know that you have always been loved. You have always been expected. Your father may have seemed tough, focused on business, but you were his light. After the accident, he lost himself in guilt and work. If you have found him, please help him to forgive himself. You both deserve a second chance. With all my eternal love, Mom. Ryan didn't realize he was crying until he felt little arms around his waist. Don't cry, Dad, Lily whispered. Grandma Caroline is watching us from heaven. She must be very happy. Maxwell moved closer, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. The documents are the official transfer of 50% of the shares in Bennett Enterprises into your name. It was her wish. But I don't need. It's not about needing, Maxwell interrupted. It's about belonging. You've always been a Bennett, even when you were just a Mason. Now you can be both. Robert leaned closer, smiling. As an adoptive father, I always knew this day would come. But seeing you now, Ryan, I know we did the right thing. You've built your own identity, your own strength. These 2 families don't compete with each other, they complement each other. Lily, who had been busy handing out presents, returned with a special package. Dad, this is from all of us. Inside the box was a digital photo frame. When Ryan turned it on, a sequence of photos began. Him as a baby in Caroline's arms, his first photos with the Masons, recent moments with Maxwell in Hampton, Lily with her 3 grandparents, the family reunited at the opening of the first Bennett and Mason Auto Services. So that you never forget that some stories have more than one beginning, Maxwell explained, and that all beginnings can lead to happy endings. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, covering Hampton in a magical silence. Duke was sleeping by the fire, Margaret was pouring more hot chocolate, and in the center of the living room, 3 generations of a family that fate had separated and reunited were celebrating not just Christmas, but the miracle of bonds that, however invisible, are never completely broken. Ryan looked around, at his biological father, who had waited 25 years for this moment, at his adoptive father, who had raised him with such love, at Margaret, who had kept his memories, and at Lily, who had been the catalyst for this whole reunion. In his chest, the heart that had once been lost beat strong and safe. Finally home. Merry Christmas, family, he said simply, and in the simple words echoed decades of love, loss, hope, and, finally, reunion. Merry Christmas, they replied in unison, their voices mingling with the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of the sea. A silent witness to a story that, like all the best stories, didn't really end. It just began.